Hero Club presents Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu.
Hello and welcome to Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 97. I'm your host and co-creator, Wheelchair21. And joining me tonight is the infallible Soundat, who is actually very fallible when trying to actually record this episode.
Yeah, life's fun.
Yeah.
Life's good now.
Exactly, because when we tried to first record this, he fell asleep during the actual first attempt. Then the second time, well, travel plans, and more travel plans. Then there wasn't a trip, then there was a trip, then there wasn't, then there was, and then they actually went on a trip, just not the one they intended to go on. Anyways, also joining us is the actual fallible Visible Ninja, who you can watch on Ninja Talks Live every Wednesday on his YouTube channel and the Hero Club Twitch account.
Yeah, check us out and watch me fail at being a host. Because autism.
Anyways, our show tonight does consist of two discussions. Our first one that we're going to be talking about is the recent Mill Creek Entertainment Blu-ray collections for Ultra Q and Ultraman. We're going to be talking a little bit about the actual releases thus far and what we think of them. And for our major discussion, like we've talked about on the previous episode, we will be discussing how would we like Toei to book a reboot of Toei's Tokusatsu SpiderMan if they ever got the actual license again to work on the show. It's going to be a very interesting take from all three of us, since we all have different ideas on how you could probably rekindle the series. Anyways, though, first off, let's actually talk about those Mill Creek Blu-ray sets. They've been released for about a week or two by now, by the time this episode airs. There's two releases out there. There's the standard edition, which has the elaborate box art, display, and packaging. And then you have the nice special edition, petite steelbook editions, which actually don't have the best packaging interior. However, they're practically the same once you actually bust open those disc sets and start playing them. So let's go over to Visible Ninja, since he did buy the Steelbook edition, and let's actually hear his thoughts on the overall presentation of the sets and the releases at hand.
Well, again, speaking as somebody who bought the Steelbook editions, all I can say is I am extremely pleased with what I got. Just the design overall is just pretty awesome. Of course, it has the typical slipcover over top, which of course has Ultraman as well as some other interesting stuff on it. And beneath it is honestly a pretty sexy looking steelbook with some nice, somewhat minimalistic, but still pretty awesome Ultraman artwork, usually just done in silver and red, which of course are fitting since that's his colors. And in all, it's just a nice little package. And of course, it, as well as the standard edition, includes a nice little booklet that acts as not only an episode guide, but a little information guide, which is kind of cool. Not to mention the fact that some of the guys from Sci-Fi Japan actually contributed to it, so it's actually quite a fact-filled read. Now, again, the biggest downside to the Steelbook editions is that you have to deal with disc stacking, in that all the discs are essentially mounted onto two separate spindles that are all stacked one on top of another. Now that they are Blu-rays, this isn't a huge issue because Blu-rays are pretty scratch and damage resistant unless you're pretty much intentionally trying to damage it or it goes through a tornado or something. But it's just like an annoyance just trying to get the discs off. But again, it's not a huge issue. And not to mention, aesthetically, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, it doesn't have a spine mural or any kind of art like that, but in all, it does look pretty sexy. Plus, of course, it indicates what series number it is on the end, just like the standard release. So you can tell which series it is at a glance in the Ultra series, with Ultra Q being number 1, and of course, the Ultraman himself being number 2. So yeah, in my opinion, I think the Steelbook's pretty dang sexy. The disc stacking is annoying, but again, it's not a huge issue. So in the end, I am very happy with my purchase.
Alright, Soundat, your take on the standard release, since you and I have the same collection.
So, I actually really like the standard releases. What ended up tipping me over, because I had pre-ordered the Steelbooks initially, was the spine art, because spine art will always get me to buy stuff. I have rebought shows just to get spine art. And also, I just generally liked how much artwork was on the standard editions. And then also learning about the disc stacking was kind of nice to have just standard disc case for that. but the standard disc case they included for both Ultra Q and Ultraman are both 7-disc cases, and Ultra Q is only 4 discs and Ultraman's only 6, so there's a lot of empty spots on the spindles, which is kind of interesting. I've never really come up with that. That usually doesn't happen. Usually it's like, oh, well, we can remove this little inner thing, and then now it's less discs. So I feel like they're kind of prepping for the longer shows in ways, because they could change out the cases. But yeah, it is a 7-disc holder for a 4-disc set, which looks a little weird. But that's okay. I do like how thick the boxes are, and the slipcovers are not top to bottom slipcovers, but they're side covers. I really like that. And I do appreciate how the booklet is its own separate piece outside of the case instead of being shoved inside of it. And overall, I'm really happy with the video quality, the audio quality, the presentation's really nice, the subtitles are really well done. And I'm also glad to see that Mill Creek has gotten to get Ultraman Blu-rays out at retail, because several people have reported seeing them at Best Buy, including myself. I actually saw only the steelbooks at Best Buy, which is kind of interesting. I really do think they're on to a great start, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to continue forward. Very curious if the spine art for Orb and Geet are going to change before release, since the packaging kind of changed a lot for Ultraman and Ultra Q.
Alright, so my take, coming off with what Soundat said, yeah, one thing that really got me was the actual packaging. I fell in love with the fact that we have the actual mosaic mural art across the border of the slipcase. I like the fact that it's a almost book-style side cover. I really do love those two. It really is very reminiscent of older VHS releases and, like I said, collector's book editions, where you just slide it in and out. I like that style. I like that shelf mentality, like that storage capability. And one thing I found rather interesting that some people might have not picked up on is that the artwork used on the Blu-ray collections for the standard releases are highly reminiscent of the individual volumes of the Blu-ray releases in Japan. Because the background artwork of like the weird spatial cloudy aura behind, like, say, Ultraman and Garamon are actually completely taken from some of the Japanese box sets, especially at the back end, where if you have the Ultraman cover where it's him over the spatial rendering, and then you have like this weird cloudy area with Red King, Seabos, and Balton, a lot of this is actually from the original Japanese release. So they're invoking not just basic, I guess you'd say, promotional art, but they're taking in a little bit of what they looked like in their original native release. I don't know if that was just an idea they had with the actual marketing at Mill Creek themselves, but this could have also been an idea through Tsuburaya to say, hey, at least when you release this as one complete set and more affordable for your basic American retail, try to make it at least still feel like it was one of our own releases, because that's what I'm getting from this vibe of having like the cool little Ultraman on the side, doing like the stop who goes there kind of pose, and then on the back you got like Red King, Balton, Seabos, whereas on the regular Ultra Q one you got Garamon, the precursor to Pigmon, and then on the back, if I believe, they have the giant plant monster. And then also the interesting thing is, what I like about the little booklets that each of them carry, they don't just actually do an interesting introduction to your shows, but they do an episode guide. And the cool thing about the episode guide is it includes who was your director, who was your writer. In addition, it bolds at least who the titular kaiju is of the episode, or who are the kaiju if there's more than one. The only thing I don't like is that there's no date for its original air date in them. I think the original Chayo releases for the individual volumes gave, I think, air dates for when the American dub aired in North America, but I sort of like having those dates. And interestingly enough, they try to give you a sort of in-depth character guide on some of the more highlighted kaiju, and then they try to complete the rest of the character guide in the back of the booklet, which is not entirely complete. They do a nice run-through of the actual characters' bios, at least by Tsuburaya standards, even though some of their bios don't actually equate to their caricatures, and they give you the actual actor who played them. Interestingly enough, the other thing that caught my eye was the fact that they try to add in key technology to the overall Ultraman mythos or Ultra mythos, like weird things that were discovered. The one thing I'm going to point out, and this is going to be a spoiler for a lot of Ultra fans who only seen, like, say, the Showa shows that were airing in America, like, say, Ultraman and Seven, or bought the child distributed release of Shout Factory's release of Ultra Q, or haven't touched any of the early Heisei to mid Heisei stuff that was available through Crunchyroll and Toku HD. I want to point out, in the booklet, if Sound Out and Visible Ninja remember, on the last page when it does Ultraman Key Technology, they focus on the blue stone of Baradahi. And the interesting thing about this is they point out the mysterious Noah gave the blue stone. Now, if anyone knows their Ultra lore like I am, and I'm sorry to say this, but this is a spoiler alert, they're foreshadowing the Nexus home video release through this episode. Now, the funny thing about it is because they made it that Nexus ties to the original Ultraman show, but the fact that they put a lot of emphasis on this Blue Stone that only appears in a one-off episode, only to become a major tribute years later, shows that Sci-Fi Japan, when helping Mill Creek make these informational booklets, is like trying to give a nod to the people who have been here long enough to go, I see what you did there for the newbies. So I really do appreciate that. One thing I also do love are the very, simple interactive menus for the actual discs. They're just very simple to the point. There's just subtitles on, subtitles off, play all episodes, or individually select. It's not like the previous release where you have to go into individual menu and whatnot. It's all on the home page. It's so simple, a caveman can do it. And on top of that, the other thing I want to point out is something that me and SoundOut were talking about, is that since these are Generation 2 files that most likely Mill Creek is dealing with right now, some of the contrast and brightness to the picture might be actually altered and changed due to the fact that these DVDs, or Blu-rays I should say, are being manufactured in Mexico. So some scenes will look obviously a lot brighter if you've ever seen the original Blu-ray release in Japan.
Yeah, basically, when it comes to disc printing, Japan does a lot of their stuff natively in Japan, while a lot of US Blu-ray releases will be outsourced to Mexico. And because they are different countries producing Blu-rays, the color transfer process is different. It's very similar, so you're not going to really notice it too much unless you're comparing it side by side. It's not going to throw the image off, but it is a general thing that happens with Blu-rays, especially of import things such as toku or anime, and that it doesn't look exactly like its Japanese Blu-ray release, but it is slightly off, and that's just due to the processing happening in a different country with different machines and a different technique being used for specifically that whatever processing company it is.
Yeah, so there will be some scenes where you might go, that wasn't that bright when I saw the Japanese release of it, or that looks a little bit too overexposed. But don't worry, it's only usually in a few scenes. It shouldn't affect the entire production run or the entire series at all. Other than that, though, I do look forward to the other mural arts in the Showa era. I'm just wondering, how SoundOut stated, will the New Generation Heroes saga have it? So that would be from Ginga onwards. I don't think so, since they're releasing them out of order. I don't think they're going to be releasing a mural art if they're not releasing them in chronological order like the Showa era, so I don't expect even the mid-Heisei shows to have that ability either, unless they're like, oh no, we're going to do it for at least Tiga, Gaia, and Dyna. Like that, I could see them maybe getting away with it, but I don't know how they're going to do it for the New Generation Heroes, or let alone Max, Nexus, Cosmos, Ultra 7X, since some of those shows don't tie to anything until years later, or certain crossover events.
I think with New Generation Heroes, if Mill Creek did want to do a mural for that, they probably could out of sequence, because at the end of the day, with spine art, typically it's done for shows that are complete runs, like, oh, here's all the seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! That line up, and yeah, of course they're released in order. It's the same show, just multiple seasons. Whereas these murals are cross-series, even though they're all part of the Ultra series, they are different shows within it. So I think that part of the reason for spine murals is to incentivize people to collect all the sets instead of just picking and choosing. And I think that maybe an out-of-sequence New Generation Heroes one would be kind of interesting to see, because I don't know of any companies that have done spine art out of sequence like that. Must have happened at least one other time. I'm trying to think of one in particular, but it could be entirely possible that's what they're doing, and they're just like, all right, let's start people with these shows because these are the more popular ones, and they'll just have to piece together the mural piece by piece until it's finished. I see it as a possibility, even if it doesn't seem likely. The other thing to consider is that we know that the sets are going to be 4 discs, and while on the current art we see normal, standard Blu-ray case size, not the thicker kind of cases of Ultraman and Ultra Q, that could also change. We'll see what happens next month.
Yeah, so we'll find that out, and we'll probably maybe do an update if we have the time within our last few episodes of Volume 1 of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. For those who don't know, we are going to have a short break once we hit 100, And then we're going to come back, continuing on with 101 forwards, but we'll be labeling it as Volume 2. We're just doing a way of CD numbering or TV show numbering rather than doing full seasons. We're just going to call it volumes. Anyways, though, like we said, sets are great. Go check it out. You can buy them physically, you can buy them digitally, so on and so forth. And let's move on to that main discussion, which is the how should Toei, or how would we want Toei to reboot Tokusatsu SpiderMan, Toei's SpiderMan in general. Now, this idea can be straight up a full-on reboot, like straight from the original source that Toei provided, or a direct made from scratch, sort of like the Amazon's reboot that had no real resemblance of what Amazon's was. So, take it away, Visible Ninja. How would you want, or how would you do a Toei Tokusatsu Spider-Man reboot?
That's a bit of a sticky one, because on the one hand, I'd want to keep elements there from the original. Then again, a lot of them are, in this day and age, extremely stupid. I'd hate to say it, but, I think I'd also wind up taking a lot of inspiration, obviously, from the more recent movies, because, of course, you're gonna, especially when it comes to origin story, because, no offense to Planet Spider, but the whole alien thing was kind of really facepalmy. Especially since it was basically all but dropped after, the first 2 episodes. But anyways, yeah, so I'd probably keep it in line with traditional Spider-Man lore, but obviously tweak it a little bit. Particularly the villain organization, I would probably keep them overall very similar, but obviously modernize them a bit more, maybe make them more kind of the Japan version of Oscorp, essentially. And I guess basically make Dr. Monster kind of the head of whatever you want to call it. Oscorp Japan, I don't know. But still have Amazonness there, but make her the dragon to, Dr. Monster and everything. Not to mention maybe you can keep some other elements. Obviously, I would probably keep our boy Spider-Man probably a somewhat shiftless dirt bike racer, because, I don't know, that kind of gave Takuya, a little something different than Peter. You know what I mean? It kind of gave him a little bit of a different vibe. Not only that, but also because he had an older sister and a younger brother he also had to look after as well. Stuff like that I'd keep. I don't know about his girlfriend. I'm sure you can work something in with that. You could kind of have the same dynamic overall, I guess, with her, except for just make her maybe a newscaster or a porter or something like that, and make Amazonness her boss, essentially kind of like it was in the original series, but obviously actually make it mean something and not just be a thing that happened like it was in the original series. Other than that, like I said, a lot of the more absurd stuff I probably would keep, even though it would be very artifacty, but obviously it would be upgraded. Yes, I would give Spider-Man a car, maybe not a flying car, but Spider Machine GP7 would probably be in there in some way, shape, or form. When it comes to Leopardon, obviously I'd overhaul it because of the whole Jaguar spaceship turning into a giant humanoid O-face robot pseudo super robot-y thing is kind of really very 1970s. So I would maybe overhaul it to be something more akin to, say, a Metal Gear or something like that, but obviously still have some little nods to the original, maybe it has a blade that it can throw as a reference to the sword figure, or it can launch some kind of sticky fluid or something out of its quote-unquote head to reference the very interesting face that Leopardon had back in the day. But yeah, overall, as weird as it seems, I would probably take a lot of notes personally, probably from Garo, especially the first few series. Just kind of in terms of tone, with that kind of darker kind of tone, especially when it came to some of the monsters and situations. Especially if you had an evil, corrupt company behind the scenes pulling the strings behind everything. Because some of the Toei Spider-Man plots, you could kind of work in that sort of direction, them kidnapping orphans for some reason, which they did originally, or one of the infamous ones, turning a failed professional wrestler or boxer, I can't remember which he was, but basically turning him into something to make him strong and fulfill his wishes and that kind of malarkey and stuff. But in my book, I would make it some kind of weird gestalt, I guess you could say, of, I'd probably say, the Sam Raimi films, married with Garo, with a little bit of, Metal Gear and maybe even, Kamen Rider Fies kind of mashed in there, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Alright, that's an interesting take, with a lot of editing that will be required. But nevertheless, sound out, what's your idea on Toei's Spider-Man?
Step 1. I'd make it a manga. Step 2, take said manga and adapt it into tokusatsu. That way we can have everything come full circle, as well as the fact that that said manga could then be colorized and published as a Marvel comic book, and then have the series licensed for release in North America. That's the main stuff. Mostly because I think the Legend of Tokusatsu Spider-Man is considered to be an international thing, in addition to the character being introduced in the Spider-Verse comics. A more international approach to release would be the first thing that I would really want. Second thing, the show itself. Going into this, I think that you kind of take the more mature tone. I think you kind of go with a little bit edgier, a little bit darker kind of look to it, but not too dark, not overly dark like Amazon's was, but something kind of in between Amazon's and Garo, or like more closer to Garo with some lighter elements to it. I think incorporating elements of the Spider-Verse would be cool. Have a couple episodes where other Spider-Men from other universes pop in to meet him, to kind of introduce him to this other world of the spiders that exist out there. In addition to that, I would add in some characters like a facsimile for Green Goblin, for Dr. Octopus, and for Scorpion, since those seem to exist in most every universe. Maybe an Electro as well. Kind of have like maybe a 13 to 26 episode series where each monster he faces is a Japanese tokusatsu version of one of his classic villains. So 1 week it's Scorpion, 1 week it might be, Electro, another one it might be a Venom that could take up a 3-parter. Something where it's like that character but a twist on it. For example, you could have a villain like Morbius, and instead of Morbius just being oh, I'm a scientist that made myself into a living vampire, it's part of a vampire curse and it was transferred over and his powers were carried over from another being, similar to how I want to keep the origin of Planet Spider being the source of Takuya's powers as Spider-Man. I would want to keep something like that, but then have like a darker twist on it with Morbius where the host actually willingly took the curse on because he wanted the power. And also to that extent, of course, we got to keep the mecha fights. The mecha fights could be a lot different. You could have some different elements to it. This would be kind of like maybe a higher budget series, more akin to a streaming show where you'd have kind of room to work with and say, okay, maybe you don't have a mecha fight every episode, but the mecha fights we do have are a lot longer, a lot more intensively apart on fighting the monster of the week. Or even having some of the more major characters. Maybe I was thinking about Venom. You could have Tokusatsu Venom essentially use a symbiote to absorb a large group of people and turn into a giant venomized version of Leopardon. But then you have to worry about Takuya's saying, oh no, there's all these innocent bystanders got sucked up into this giant venom creature. How do I defeat Venom without destroying them? Maybe even having like a little bit of a twist on it to where the Venom symbiote could take over a Leopardon and then Takuya having to overcome that sort of angle. But I never want Takuya to get overcome by the Venom symbiote, just Leopardon to kind of give it that little bit of twist, kind of work with the mythology. I would like, of course, the character to remain distinctively different than Peter Parker. Like Visible Ninja had said, let's not really give him too many ships, too many love interests. I think keeping it strictly to that would be great. I think him being kind of a noble hero type is very important to the character overall. And I kind of want to see like maybe even cross-branding of some sort where into the series kind of leaves it where Takuya goes through a dimensional portal to go help with an event happening in the Spider-Verse, which could eventually lead to him appearing in the next Spider-Verse movie. Kind of tying it together to where it doesn't feel like it's just like the show that was kind of this wacky thing that was made in Japan and people kind of look at it as, wow, that was kind of cool, but more so something that could be intrinsic to the Spider-Man mythos as a whole and something that could be a very key important role in the overall comics or movie mediums. And I do think starting it off as a manga would kind of give it a different quality than a lot of tokusatsu, which usually are original work, and kind of doing the adaptation. But the distinctive difference between the two being that the manga could be longer, more fleshed out for deeper character work, whereas the TV series would be a little bit more concise, a lot more action-based, and kind of bringing some of those ideas into a physical realm. So overall, that's what I kind of think would be a great way to reboot Tokusatsu Spider-Man, kind of bring him into being part of the overall Spider-Man world and mythos and being a true component of the Spider-Verse instead of just being something that was a nice cameo to throw in based on a Japanese series that had nothing to do with anything else.
Alright, that's pretty good. You had some actual points that I'm going to bring up Sound Out, where what I would do is similar to Sound Out, where he said, you gotta take some of Spider-Man's rogues, his enemies, his villains, his, I guess you would say, his antithesis and foils, and in a sense, tokusatsu them. You gotta turn them into kaijins. You gotta turn them into different type of villains that fit the Japanese media archetype of what is a villain, what is a character. Now for me, since Spider-Man actually was sort of a basis for Sentai, as well as Metal Hero due to the involvement of the giant mecha and robot that was Leopardon, I would want to take elements that we've seen from both franchises. And I would want to have it that, like Soundout said, where it is a streaming service series. I'd want to make it that it's not actually one and done. I would want to do it where it's more like, I guess you would say, similar to how Netflix has original series where they either run for maybe 3 or 5 seasons, but they're still 13 episode base. I want to have it that it's not like how Amazon's was treated with deliberately 26 episodes. I'd want this to feel like you get a nice, good, overarching drama, like it's a prime time, almost CW-esque event where we have 5 seasons of, say, Arrow, or in this case, Arrow actually has, 7 or 8. I would just want to have it that it has maybe like 5 13-episode seasons or arcs. And the idea is, let's take the idea a little bit of, like, say, maybe Spielban and the Talder. We have this evil organization that is loosely either interdimensional beings or just some guy who deals with genetic alterations and cyborgs. In this case, we would have it, as Metal wanted to use, an XP of Oscorp. You have it that you have an Osborn-like character being kind of like God Neros or Waller from Spielban, and he has different generals, and each of the generals represent maybe, say, the Sinister Six. So you have it that Green Goblin-esque Osborn dude has, like, say, members of the Sinister Six as his generals, and below them are other obscure types of Spider-Man's week-to-week enemies. So you'd have, like, stuff with, like, Electro, and you'd have stuff like Mysterio and other characters showing up, and they might actually be pivotal villains who are either trying to overthrow each other to be in the graces of their lord, or working together just to get the job done. And in the other case, I would want to have it, like Metal stated, we had it that Takuya actually had siblings. So in this case, instead of just having both the younger brother and the sister, just keep the sister and turn her into Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, and have him be Spider-Man. So you have it that we have a almost Metal Hero-esque, like with Spielban, where you have Spielban and Lady Diane. You have her be his secondary writer. You don't make her just feel like a sidekick. You flesh her out so she can actually stand alone on her own as a character, even though the show is still centered around her brother. We also could even do elements of bringing in other Spider-Man characters, like, say, Scarlet Spider and Kane. You can easily make it that they are either alternate realities to try to tie in with Spider-Verse lore, or you could have it that they're legitimate body doubles from other planets if we're doing evil space aliens or genetic cloning, because you could even have it that one of the generals, instead of being directly Sinister Six, one of the generals is actually supposed to be an XP of the Jackal who cloned him and was like, look at me, I made these evil clones of you. But then they go rogue and go, we don't want to be your puppets and pawns, and they join the good guys, so it can be kind of Sentai-y. So you get that vibe of what Spider-Man set up for Toei. You get a bit of Metal Hero, you get a bit of Sentai, and it tells this story that can also interest people who haven't already picked up the Marvel distributed comics in Japan, but get them more inclined to knowing the mythos by telling it through a tokusatsu, where you have elements of the Sinister Six, the symbiotes, the Clone Saga, other stuff like that, all tied in. I feel like with Leopardon, you could have him, but as Soundout said, use him in a lower dexterity, but when he is used, make his time significant. Make it be like, for every, say, 13-episode season, he's used at least 4 or 5 times, and in those 5 uses, each time he's on screen is maybe 5 to actual 15 minutes of runtime, depending on how long you make an episode run. Because this could be a half-hour show, this could be a typical 46 to 53-minute show. It all depends on how they want to do it, but I still feel like it should still be a man in suit, with a little bit of CG to help him emote and move. As well as, if you redesign Leopardon, maybe give him, like, the leopard skin, but take out his sex doll face, because that thing is a joke. That is the one thing, as Visible Ninja tried to wiggle around. Terrible idea. He just has fuck me face. But overall, I feel like if you want to make it a legitimate show, you're going to make it a little bit corny, a little bit an homage to Metal Hero Sentai. You got to give it a little bit of dark edge, though. You got to give it a nice vibe of what you would expect, I guess, teenagers and young adults to probably want, not just for Americans, but also the home audience in Japan. Because I feel like if they were to do a Tokusatsu Spider-Man again, the idea isn't really necessarily for their general home audience, but because the Western world is so enamored with the, hey, it's a cool thing that happened once, but we'd also kind of sort of want it to happen again. Because when they had him show up in the actual Spider-Verse comic, everyone lost their frickin' mind and was like, oh shit, are they working with Toei again? But it was just like, no, we own the rights so we can use it kind of ordeal. So I think that's what I want. I want more of it being a tribute to the Western side, but also being a gift to the fans that know what Spider-Man has caused for Toei success with other tokusatsus. That's how I see it as, because I would love to see, like, certain things Sound Out brought up, like having Venom in the series. But I also want to have it that we can introduce all of these other Spider-Men that sort of exist in a more of a Japanese telling. On top of that, because they have like a very simple, I guess you would say, spandex-like suit, you could even add in the idea of Iron Spider, Armored Spider. There's a lot of variants to the actual suit that it could work with the tokusatsu, where you could blend it. Like I said, I want to make it where you feel like this is a tribute to what came after Spider-Man, as well as Spider-Man itself. So you could have it that as the series progresses, you have it that Takuya's Spider-Man suit maybe gets a little bit more Iron Spider-y, or it gets a blend of looking like a Kamen Rider suit / Metal Hero suit, but still has that basis of being Spider-Man. So you have it that as your series grows, the character grows, and it kind of takes a shift of showing the Japanese audience all the stuff that Spider-Man is in America, but in their own special way of doing things. Anyone want to add to that? No one? Nothing?
I mean, isn't that the whole point? Is to show Japan how cool Spider-Man can be and show America how cool Japan can be?
Yeah, that's what I feel like. That's how I feel like you gotta do this reboot, is if you just take elements that already do exist and add more to it. Cause, like Visible Ninja said, the weird alien thing that is a reference to Green Lantern is still weird. Like, yo dog, here's my weird spider powers from Planet Spider that we're gonna forget ever happened after 3 to 5 episodes.
Also, Planet Spider. At least get a better name.
This is Japan and Toei. Planet Vegeta. Come on, fam. I mean, Toriyama isn't really actually working for Toei, but the irony that it was also distributed by Shonen Jump, which is, in a sense, in association with Toei, is just more ironic. You know what I'm saying?
Toei owns their asses, and we all know that.
Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's just more of the irony of everything that Toei owns or touches or licenses is like, what's your planet's name? Planet Beast. What's on Planet Beast? Beast people. Or Autobots being the Cybertrons, living on Cybertron. But then the Decepticons are the Destrons. So shouldn't there be a planet Destron too? But overall, I think if you were to really move forward with the idea, if Disney and Marvel and Toei were able to come to some agreement with Sony, like all of the parties came together and were like, yo, let's do this. I don't know who would be the best person to put in charge of the project with, say, the Toei side. I feel like if you wanted to make it a good thing, you would have to maybe like go, hey, let's have Feige and Raimi together, because I feel like Raimi knows a lot of the old vintage era comics, and even though Feige is like, I'm the head of Marvel, he's not going to want to be hands-on. So I feel like if you put a Raimi in there, or put anyone else who's still alive that's written vintage Spider-Man comics, or at least Silver, early Bronze, you might have a good connection to what you want to build on to your modern era. Because like, I feel like they wouldn't want to throw Dan Slott to the wolves in Japan. Who do you think, having read Spider-Man, do you think they could throw to Toei if it was an actual signed-off deal? Like, what writers or directors do you think could have worked with them to come up with a better story that connects both worlds?
That's a tough choice because there's a lot of comic writers out there. I think a lot of people would say Dan Slott because of his work on the original Spider-Verse. But for me personally, I think Dan Slott was kind of like running out of stuff to do with Spider-Man after a certain point, and he wasn't feeling fresh anymore, which is why I'm glad he stopped and started working on Fantastic Four, which is going much better. So I kind of would throw Nick Spencer into the ring because he's recently been doing stuff with the 2099 universe again in his Spider-Man run, and I'm honestly pretty impressed at how he's able to pull together all of those characters. So he has a good way of reintroducing stuff. Wildcard choice, though, Jonathan Hickman, because recently he just revamped the X-Men and made them more interesting than ever, so why not give him a shot? I think not only do we need somebody that has good writing talent, I'd say, but just in general, somebody who can capture a different type of character than we're used to seeing, because I think that's very important, is that we don't want it to feel Toeis Spider-Man and just feel like Peter Spider-Man. We want kind of like a different viewpoint on that. So I think writers like that are what we're kind of looking for. And I mean, it wouldn't be too much out of the realm of possibility for like Nick Spencer, Jonathan Hickman to work on the story and characters with Toei, as Joe Quesada worked on a lot of the scripts and stories for the Marvel anime at Madhouse. And while he didn't write stuff directly, he kind of was a story consultant in a lot of ways. So you can kind of have that kind of collaboration, maybe bring in some Japanese writers, maybe Kobayashi. I think there's a lot of options there if you had like a collaborative work between writers from Marvel as well as writers and directors from Toei.
Yeah, because I was looking at it as also in the mindset of, I feel like you also do need people that are either of the modern era, like you say, to write, but I also, like I said earlier, like I would want to see some of the more vintage guys that are still around who maybe would be willing to work on it, because I don't feel like Marvel or Disney would want to put all of their best talent working on a sub-project unless they knew it could really pay off, because I feel like you need to have at least one older guy there, or someone who's been around the block, plus people who are fresh and current to add to that thing, because when you think about it, Spider-Man is what, 60 years almost? Maybe a little older than that?
Almost 60 years, I think.
Yeah. So when you think about it, you could throw anyone, even current or currently living from the past, in there. Because I feel like you could take certain people and be like, yo, how do you want them to do this? Or how do you want them to do that? As long as they know the source material and can remember the history, I think we're fine, personally.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, don't be J.J. Abrams. Don't be J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
All right. J.J. Abrams has gotten a lot of crap for his Spider-Man comic, and every bit of it is deserved.
Oh, okay. Thank God you were going in that direction, because I was like, yo, are you gonna defend him on this show and lead to an 8-hour podcast? No. Don't you do this to me, Ricky Bobby.
Hey, I'll tell you this much. I knew that comic was going to be trash. Like, they announced it, and I was like, J.J. Abrams writing a Spider-Man comic. This is going to be a total disaster. And everyone's like, oh, we're so excited. I'm like, I don't know why, but sure, okay. And then it came out and was a total disaster, and I'm just like, I was right.
When I heard that, I was like, yo, are you sure you're going to be working on something that's actually sci-fi, like Guardians or Fantastic Four? They're like, no, we'll put him on Spider-Man. I'm like, do you know what he's going to do to Peter? And they're like, he's going to do great things. Peter, deadbeat dad. Yeah.
I mean, all those tweets about the first cover reveal being like, oh, look, it's our Peter and MJ rights. This is going to be wonderful. Yeah, those tweets didn't age well. Nope. And they still got like 4 more issues. I'm like, the sales are just going to dip off so bad on those.
So overall, like we said, Toei's Tokusatsu Spider-Man is one hell of a ride. You should actually go check it out if you can. I'm pretty sure there's fan subs out there for it, and there have been official subs for it through Marvel themselves in the past.
What you'll probably find is the rips of the official subs from the Marvel.com website that no longer are officially legal to stream, so have at it, kids.
So you should check it out. It's one hell of a drug trip, and an interesting dip into Tokusatsu as a whole, since it wasn't really fleshed out by Toei at that point, because they only had Kamen Rider, and they only had a little bit of Sentai at this point, or not even yet did they have Sentai, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the early days of Toei, where, let's just say, they really loved their cocaine. Really loved their cocaine.
They loved their cocaine until, like, somebody was like, yo, no more cocaine on set.
Yeah, so if you also have an interesting pitch or idea you want to tell us about, leave it in the comments below, or tweet it at us at Hero Club for Life, or even message us on Hero Club's Facebook page. We'd love to hear them, but if you also agree, just leave a like and a little comment saying, yo, I agree with this, this, and this, or yada, yada, yada. Have an open discussion with us in our comments, in our message boards, or message boxes, or whatever.
Please talk to us, we're lonely.
But nevertheless, though, we've almost gone a full hour on this discussion. Well, not full hour on this discussion, on both discussions. So let's start wrapping up our show. Visible Ninja, will you please tell people how to follow you?
You can hit me up on Twitter at Visible Ninja 0, on YouTube at Visible Ninja Dojo. That's where I host my little show that Wheels talked about earlier. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Check us out. And of course, you can check out the channel for the archives of the shows, so hit it up. You can also incidentally find me on Mixer at Visible Ninja 02, though I haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but hey, you never know.
Sound out your plugs.
You can check me out on Twitter and YouTube at Soundout12. You can also check out my series, Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid Showcase, showcasing the Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid tabletop game. I'm working hard on that series. Please watch it. Otherwise, I'll probably just decide to get on more soapboxes and rant and rave about pop culture, fandoms, and media, which probably should be its own channel, but it's probably just going to become my main channel because I don't know, I got stuff to talk about.
Alright, I am Wheelchair21 on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. My Instagram is Taja_Doyle. Currently, I am in production to rebooting Doyle's DVDs with a more quality production level. Like, it's going to be higher quality. There might be actual footage that should get me copywritten into oblivion, so on and so forth. And as for Hero Club, it's all in the outro, but if you're not going to stay for that, it's Hero Club for Life at most areas on social media. And you can check us out there whenever, and check out our site, hero-club.com. We'll see you all next week, hopefully with episode 98.
Hey, it's Wheelchair21, and thanks again for listening to an all-new episode of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. If you want to hear more content or see more content from the Hero Club YouTube channel, we're going to need you to subscribe, like, comment with some feedback, and share this channel with a friend. We also would like you to check out our website, hero-club.com, and follow us on various social media outlets just by looking up Hero Club for Life, as well as the stores you see are where we shop. Anyways, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.